This is a project of the Mashup Americans.
Welcome to Grief Collected, where we explore how grief moves through our bodies, our families, and our communities, and why we need to feel it all in order to transform our future.
Today, we're talking to the writer, organizer, and healer Adrienne Maree Brown about emerging from our collective grief and about creating our future together. Hey, I'm Amy Choi.
And I'm Rebecca Lair, and we are the Mashup Americans.
This is the very last episode of the series. Ooh, very nice trumpet sounds.
You know, you build skills over time, and that's one of them. It's been a long time in the making, this series, and also it just like, that's me snapping, happened so fast.
It happens so fast. It's like 2 years of work, and then all of a sudden we're here.